There you go.
Okay, we're live again this morning. Our next subject is Chittenden County I-89 2050 plan. Wow, 2050. We're moving right ahead here. Senator Chittenden, would you like to introduce the guest this morning?
He's not quite back yet.
Okay, we'll get another minute here.
Can I ask a question? Liz, will I be able to screen share?
Yes, Charlie, I've made you a co-host, so you can set that up now.
Thank you.
All right, do we have our committee members back on duty?
Not yet. It looks like Senator Kitchell.
I'm here.
Oh, you're
Okay,
there. Okay.
Mitchell's here, Senator Chittenden here. Okay, all right. Okay, our next item this morning is Chittenden County I-89 2050 plan. Charlie Baker is here with us this morning, and if you will introduce yourself, Mr. Baker, and tell us the committee what the issue is this morning.
As soon as I unmute. Thank you. Yeah, good morning. Charlie Baker, I'm the Executive Director of the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, and we're managing this project with VTrans, and I think maybe I'll defer to Kevin Marshy for a minute to do a little.
Sure, that would be great. And thank you for sending us Senator Chittenden, okay?
You're welcome.
All right, who's
Good-
mayor? Yes.
Good morning. Good morning. This is Kevin
there.
Marshy.
There. Morning,
How are
Kevin.
you this
Good
morning?
Good.
For the record, Kevin Marshy, Director of the Asset Management Bureau in the Highway Division for VTrans.
Okay,
Happy to be with you this morning. Senator, a couple of things. One, listening to the end of the previous testimony, yes, this is 2050, so we are looking quite a ways forward with this
See that,
plan.
we're talking 2050. Jane, we have
Right,
to
and-
stick around and we'll make sure this happens, you know?
Yeah, I know. It would be like, what was the bridge we went down and drove over? Was it down near Middlebury? You
Oh, yeah.
remember that big
Yeah.
event?
Yeah, that's right. We cut the
Yeah,
ribbon down
So, so I'll put it on my schedule.
there. Okay, put it on your schedule. All right,
Yeah.
go right ahead.
And certainly, Senator, one thing I would mention too, I will let you know that at least from my perspective, Chittenden County is not the forgotten county. I have twin daughters. I have twin daughters at UVM, and I send them a good portion of my salary to Chittenden County.
I would say a big portion of your salary.
Right. So good
Well,
morning.
I had to get that in there because, you know, those Chittenden County folks think they're forgotten. So, you know, I just,
Charlie reminds us quite often. So
No, I think they feel like they're the universal donor.
economic engine.
right.
Charlie's been there a long time. Charlie, how many years you been there?
12 years now.
12 years. Wow. Wow. Okay. All
So-
right. Go right ahead.
So we wanted to just, I'm going to kick this off and hand it over to Charlie, but I just wanted to touch base a little bit on kind of the background from VTrans's perspective on this study. Obviously, the interstate in general, statewide is aging. We built it in the 1960s, 1970s. Clearly the most heavily traveled portion with, both cars, trucks, and the heavy loads is in Chittenden County. And so from VTrans perspective, there's a lot of issues to be addressed on I-89 as part of this study. Certainly safety and capacity are important parts of this, but also just the managing the assets out there. The 60-year-old culverts and pavements and bridges and so forth. So this study is much more encompassing maybe than previous studies. I was involved in the study in the late 90s up here talking about Exit 12B and 13, where we were looking more just at the traffic components. So this study, we're fortunate that CCRPC stepped up and said, hey, we'll take the lead on this. So we are, as Charlie already mentioned, we're partners in this, and we're looking to come up with answers and solutions that will guide us to the next steps, working with the RPC and the communities up there and others as well, as I'm sure Charlie will touch on in terms of what is the future for this corridor up there, not just the interstate portion, but also, what are we going to be doing at the interchanges, not just for cars, but what are we doing for transit? What are we doing for bikes and peds at those interchanges as well? So a pretty comprehensive study, and we're fortunate to have the partner that we have in the CCRPC. So with that, I will turn it over to Charlie for the presentation.
Thank you very much. Any questions before we turn to
Thank
Charlie?
you, Mr. Chair, and to the members of the committee. Appreciate the time in front of you today, and to Kevin for the introduction there. And we are not asking for anything today. So just want to make sure you know that.
Oh, why don't you introduce yourself, Charlie, and what your role is, okay?
Yeah, so I'm with the Regional Planning Commission, and we're also the Metropolitan
Hi.
Planning Organization, which, I'm sorry?
Liz, you're not muted.
Oh, okay. Wasn't sure if she was trying to tell me something, so thank you. We're the also the Metropolitan Planning Organization. We get some dedicated federal funds for transportation planning because of that. The great majority of the funding for this study is coming from those NPO funds. And there is no specific request right now, but just to let you know that this process is underway. And really, I think we feel a responsibility as a Regional Planning Commission to be looking at the long-term future and how do we meet all of our goals. So although this is a transportation study, it's not intended just to meet transportation objectives. We're also looking at our energy and land use goals and just community goals. And I'll get into that a little bit. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm probably going to give you a little more than you want about the detail of the study, but just want to make sure, and Tom, it won't be as much as you saw Tuesday night. So you'll get a little break, but and apologies to Senator Chittenden who saw this on Tuesday night. So hopefully you can see my screen. And I'll give you a little bit of background. Actually show you the stage that we're at. We're looking at interchange concepts right now. That's not the whole purpose of this, is not the interchanges, but it is a key part to get to closure on what interstates to carry forward. And we're kind of in a stage where we're looking at how to evaluate those interchanges, metrics and scoring. And then we're starting to talk about bundles. So we're going to end up with probably like 3 bundles to look at the range of options for the whole corridor later this fall. So we're starting to take some input. And then just to ground you in the demographic forecast that we have, we're looking at, well, over the next 30 years, a 14% increase in population. So, less like 0.4% population growth in Chittenden County. However, more significant housing and employment growth, closer to 30% for both of those. So about 1% a year in housing and employment growth. 2 points I'll just make quickly on that is, one is we're going to continue to have housing issues in that household size continues to go down. We're building, you can see that just from more housing, higher percent of housing units than population. And we're still going to continue to have an issue with commuting, people having to commute longer distances to jobs in Chittenden County as they look for affordable housing outside Chittenden County.
Charlie, help me answer the question of, there's hundreds and hundreds of new apartments being built every day in Chittenden County. As I drive down there, where are the people coming from? Do we have that many people moving to Chittenden County, or I just can't believe, I'll bet you in the last 3 or 4 years, there's 1,000 new apartments or maybe more. I don't know.
Yeah, we've been averaging more than 700 a year, Senator. So
that's what I'm saying. I just, it's amazing. And yet there's still a shortage. So where are there new people moving in?
Yes. Well, 2 things are happening. I think we're both getting people from in other parts of Vermont,
Okay.
if they're able to get maybe closer to their jobs or school, are moving in, and we're getting people from out of state. So there's a mix.
Okay.
And the growth, my best guess is it's around 700 to 800 people a year, and that's about the same number of housing units that we're building.
It's just, I've never seen such a growth in the past few years. For years it was stale. Now it's just going crazy. Everywhere they're building, they're filled. Yeah.
Yeah, and as a side note, we had a Building Homes Together campaign with Housing Vermont and Champlain Housing Trust because we knew the housing market is so broken here. The
Wow.
vacancy rates are
Yeah.
so low that we have that demand way outpaces supply, and I'm not seeing an end to that. We set out
Yeah.
a goal 5 years to build 3,500 homes. We're going to beat that mark, and I bet we could have absorbed double that.
I know it's just, well, thank you. I'm just trying to figure that out because there isn't a day that goes by you don't see a new development somewhere with housing, and yet they seem to be filled. And so anyway, thank you.
I'd like to say we conquered the housing problem, but we're not even close. But it does put pressure on the transportation system, right? In our regional plan, and we worked with VTrans on this a lot. The vast majority of funding, as you know, goes to preserving the system. We got to the 70% number as we looked out to the future. And then we're trying to do everything we can to really invest in our communities and reducing traffic demand. So smart growth, more compact development, safety improvements, technology improvements, as you were just discussing, demand management, walking, biking, and then capacity only if it's ever needed. Also transit, in our plan, we're talking about doubling transit service if possible. And when we did that, we did all that, and we still kind of came up with an issue that where the system seems to break down. I'll show you a map about that in a second. With the kind of results we get from all those investments is some decrease in miles of travel and hours of travel, which can be a surrogate for delay on the system, and progress towards meeting our climate and energy and community goals in increasing mode share for non-auto traffic. And as you were just talking in your last conversation, to meet our energy goals, we have to get to 90% fleet electrification by 2050. And that reduces 77% or so of fuel consumption, if you're thinking about it from a greenhouse gas perspective. And this is, there's 3 maps here. This is the current state of the system in terms of capacity. So this, I don't know if you've seen many maps like this, but this is a map out of our traffic model that measures the amount of traffic compared to the capacity of the roadways. And you can see right now the segment between 14 and 15 and down where 189 meets Shelburne Road, we're in the 80 percentile, 80 to 90% of traffic compared to the capacity, or volume to capacity is what we're calling this, VC ratio. If we don't do anything, the segment between 14 and 15 over the next 30 years is forecast to go over capacity. So that's really, I think this is what kind of triggered the concern in our minds was like, then we're at a gridlock place in the heart of Chittenden County, in the heart of our urban area. And then we looked at doing all those things that I just mentioned in our plan. And that does help. It gets us in the 90 percentile of using capacity, which is still more congested than it is today, right? We're not solving congestion, but it looks like a better situation. When we looked at this, and this has a couple straw man projects in it. One was widening 89 between 14 and 15. And it looked like maybe a new interchange somewhere in this area would help disperse the traffic in a better way. And so just as a straw project, there's 12B in the plan with the notion that we needed to do this study to figure out what we should really do. Senator Chin?
Senator Mazerman, if I ask
Yes,
a
I'm
question.
sorry. Go ahead.
So Charlie, one question I didn't ask on Tuesday night, and I loved this presentation, so thanks for coming back, is the circumferential highway that has now been shelved for, what, 10 years or so. How much, if at anything, if at all, has that factored into the need for this additional study that we don't have a circumferential highway rerouting traffic outside of this population center?
Yeah, and the VTrans folks may be able to speak better to that, probably have more knowledge of the circus. But my sense is that not very much at all. I don't think the circuit would have solved this issue. This is a lot of people that are trying to get to this part of Chittenden County or get out of this part of Chittenden County, I guess, depending on your perspective.
I
I
know,
can add a little.
I know,
I
I know
can add
the
a little
bridge,
bit.
I know the bridge at exit 14, that bridge, every time I go underneath it, I look up and it's falling down. There's pieces, there's pieces of concrete coming down the road all the time.
Senator Mazza?
Yes, Senator Persley.
Charlie, can you just tell me what the VC ratio, that's vehicles per something else? What is that number?
That's that total volume of vehicles versus the capacity of the roadway segment. So if the road can handle 2,000 cars in a lane per hour, that's like full capacity. And then this is telling us that we're getting pretty close to that kind of number. And I'm making 2,000 might not be the exact number, but it might be something like that on the interstate.
And it's rated, that capacity is rated like that would allow the cars to travel at the speed limit or something like that.
Yeah. So this is a little different than looking at congestion where you talk about like seconds of delay. This is trying to be a little bit more analytical and quantitative and not so qualitative. Like this is just really how many cars can you fit through that road segment per hour. Okay. Thank you for the question. So we decided along with VTrans that we should study this area and not just look at that issue, but all the issues that we have on the corridor. It's 37 miles, 7 interchanges. Apologies for the small text here, but I just want to give you a sense of the scope of work. Has 7 tasks. We spent the first year and a half really just doing background analysis, existing conditions, and working with the public and advisory committees to come up with a vision and goals statement. So we finished that kind of, I think, last June, September. And so for the last maybe 9 months or so, we've been really diving into the interchange question because we wanted to solve which interchanges to carry forward. And I'll give you a little bit more detail on that. And then in the next tasks, we want to get to a bundle of investments that best satisfy all the goals, including our energy, transportation, community goals. That's task 5. Task 6, one important idea that we have embedded in this implementation plan is we need to really monitor what's happening here in the long term and only trigger particularly the big investments when they're really needed. We don't want to spend, particularly on an interchange, tens of millions of dollars if we don't really need it. And we don't want to do that prematurely for sure. So just a couple concepts real quickly on the goal statement. I think we're talking about an interchange that is safe, resilient, and really serves all the people that use it and meets our state, regional, and municipal plans and goals. That's in the vision statement. We have 6 different goals: safety, livability, mobility, environment, economy, and system preservation. And the triggering notion and the monitoring notion is a note down here at the bottom. I mentioned the interchange stage that we're at. Last summer, we were looking at 8 interchanges. So including from Bolton, some different interchanges here in like the South Burlington area. One simple U-turn, one was an interchange between 14 and 15, the full interchange at Winooski, and then a new interchange at Milton. Bolton and Milton are still interested in those interchanges. We are not carrying them forward for full analysis in this study, but they have asked us to do a little bit of looking. Those interchanges had plans from, and Kevin and Joe may know this better, I think going back maybe into the 80s. And so they have asked us to take a quick look at how close those plans comply with environmental and engineering standards. But that's really on the side for now. And we're really focused now on these 3 interchanges in South Burlington. Sorry, was there a question? No? Okay. And so in those 3 locations, we now have 5 options on the table. And what we're trying to do is get to 1 option at 14 and 1 option at 12 or 13. So we're trying to narrow the focus and I guess, just get to some community closure. Senator Chittenden, I hope you don't take offense to the statement, but South Burlington has had 12B and 13 in their city plan for at least a couple decades, if not longer, without real closure between the city, the Regional Planning Commission, and VTrans about what should move forward. And so I think we're using this study to try to get to closure on that perspective. And within the city, and frankly, within our regional plan, we don't have closure either.
Where would the new interchange be on exit 12B? Where would that one be?
I'll show you in 1 second.
Okay, all right.
Sorry, Senator Chittenden.
To that point, Charlie, just to be clear, it's still in our comprehensive plan, all of these exits. We didn't shut the door on any of these. And that's a question for you, is when we narrow in your study, does that have implications for our comprehensive plan? But that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. My hope, I'll express it as somewhere, a hope or prayer or wish, is that we do come to close. I'm using the word closure. I'm not sure that's the right word, but consensus on which interchange to keep in between 12 and 13, and that we then can align the city's plan and the regional plan to both be on board with the same path forward. Because we don't really have a clear path forward at this point. We have ideas, but not an agreement on the plan. Senator Mazza, here's the answer to your question. Exit 12B, so here's 89, kind of going east-west, and this is Heinsberg Road.
Okay.
Yep, and of course, Tilly Drive, we got a lot of medical offices there, but there's been development really pretty close to that interchange or that overpass now.
Oh, it's near the Whale's Tail, you're saying? Okay.
Yeah, the Whale's Tails is over here to the right, on probably the right edge of the screen here.
So this is all South Burlington for those of us who are live over in the hinterland. Okay.
Yeah, come on over, spend some money over here.
Yeah,
spread the wealth.
I probably will. No, I just wanted to make sure, obviously, when you're talking about a new interchange, that gets into land acquisition and a host of challenges, I would imagine here.
Yes.
But just wondering.
Yep.
Senator Mazza?
Yes, go ahead, Senator.
One way you could close the discussion on exit 12B by just referring to its new exit number, because VTrans is going to make us switch all these exit numbers to the mileage number. So.
Fair enough. All right, exit 83.
Yeah.
You get that, Kevin?
People will be excited about a new 83 that didn't like 12B.
Right.
No, noted.
That's a guess at the mileage number. I don't know. It's somewhere around there. But to Senator Kitchell's point, there has been land development right around this, which it can no longer be maybe a more simple diamond interchange that might have been conceived a couple decades ago. And so the best concept that the engineering team here could come up with was to actually have the northbound get on and off through an intersection with Tilly Drive, which then would go through another intersection with Heinsberg Road. So kind of a lot of traffic in this kind of like little local street here because the development is so close here on the north side. And then south side would be on and off. Thankfully, this parcel is undeveloped right now. So this is still possible to do the south side development. And this road becomes bigger, right? It's a 2-lane road right now. It would have to be a 4-lane road. To deal with bicyclists and pedestrians, we're proposing sidewalks and a path on each side. And is there something else I want to say about that?
Charlie, would you talk about the airport at all? Does this benefit the airport 12B?
Yeah, that is one of the, it's not a current metric. So that is a metric that has come up as to whether this provides better access to the airport than exit 13. So let me pop to exit 13. So obviously we have an exit 13 or whatever the new mileage number will be. I got to get those numbers in my head, Senator Perchlik. That's a good point. But it's a partial interchange, right? You can only go to and from 189 towards Shelburne Road with it. So this notion is to allow all movements. And we've been reviewing this with VTrans and Federal Highway engineers. So this would add 3 ramps. The first one is pretty funky. It's a U-turn. So if you're heading southbound on 89, you get off on 189, but then be able to take a left turn into a U-turn and, oh, shoot, sorry, didn't mean to do that. And then merge in the left lane on 189 to be able to get eastbound on Kennedy. And then to and from Kennedy, there are 2 new ramps so that you could get to and from northbound 89, which you can't do right now. We've been referring to this as a hybrid 13, so it kind of keeps existing 13, but adds a few ramps so you can do all movements. And because we're trying to address bicyclists and pedestrians, there's the idea of carrying the path that's on Kennedy up along here and over a bike ped bridge, and then connecting over to the path that's over on Spear Street. So that's an interesting lower cost, lower capital cost option. And then here is a bigger capital cost, but maybe better from a long-term maintenance idea, is a single point diamond interchange. Sorry, I think the title might be getting blocked there a little bit. This one takes a little bit more to explain. There's a couple big ideas here. One is decreasing the classification of the interstate down to an arterial. And so 189 would no longer be an arterial in this idea, mostly because there's a traffic signal here handling all movements at this new or updated interchange. The other big idea is we pull the eastbound leg of 189, wouldn't need to be interstate anymore. It could be more like a boulevard, more like Kennedy Drive, and pull that up so that it's right where the westbound alignment is. So it's all on one road here. And so by doing that, we remove a lot of interstate segment here, bridges and culverts that are no longer needed. So there's kind of a big asset management gain here. And then to zoom in a little bit so you can see the actual intersection and interchange, the whole thing gets more compact. And all of the movements, if you're trying to make a left turn, they all come to this single traffic light, and right turns are pretty much able to move more freely. And again, trying to address bicyclists and pedestrians, declassifying this from an interstate allows us to put a shared use path on the north side here. And again, connect Kennedy to the paths over here on Spear. So that's that one. So those are the 3 on 13. That's a question?
Yes. Chittenden.
Wednesday morning when we met, this is why I actually mentioned it, is I thought Senate Transportation might be interested to know that South Burlington in this study is considering the decertification of what I also found out to be the shortest interstate segment in the country. So 189 is the shortest segment of any interstate anywhere. And I also didn't get an answer on Tuesday night, Charlie. It's still on my to-do list to figure out is how this factors in or doesn't with the Champlain Parkway. Not that this is moving forward, but I just was assessing the feasibility of this. And if you're really trying to narrow down options, can we really consider decertifying 189 and what the implications might be for our Burlington friends planning the Champlain Parkway?
Yeah, Federal Highway now has kind of a process for doing that. It's happening in different cities around the country, particularly for interstates that went through cities. Where they're kind of reclaiming them, or maybe if they're elevated, they're bringing them down to ground level. We're not in that situation here, but there is a process to do that. In one way, when I think about this, it matches up better with the boulevard that the Champlain Parkway is now designed to be, right? You'd still have an interchange at Shelburne Road, so you still have a grade separated interchange there with the boulevard, but it seems like it could work okay. It's 2 lanes in each direction. It kind of would bring traffic down to that interchange with 1 lane heading on the Champlain Parkway.
Anything that helps the Burlington Airport, we ought to tax Burlington because they get all the revenue from it. So they ought to pay for this. Thank you. Okay.
Was that a motion?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Well, they want to control the airport, but yet they don't want any of the consequences. So they want
Yeah,
the
and one
route.
of the things we'll look at is, does this really help the airport, right? Because this would drop you at Kennedy Drive and allow you kind of a straight shot up Kennedy to the airport. And versus 12B, which is a little closer, but a couple more traffic lights to get to.
Sorry to
Yes,
keep
Senator
chiming in. One more, just not to double back, but I didn't hear in your presentation, Charlie, and I think you're going to get to the metrics, but one thing about 12B in earlier presentations and this very thorough work you've been doing that I think this committee should hear is the economic impact. It would actually drive additional jobs, a quantifiable number of high-paying, really rich, not rich, that's the wrong word, high-paying, attractive jobs for the state of Vermont right near those two tech centers, the Whale's Tail. So that's an aspect that's come up in conversation that actually is very germane to this Senate Transportation Committee, the notion of a transportation TIF. So if there was local match or local dollars needed to provide for this, I would be interested to hear from Senator Mazza and this committee if we wanted to explore what I've been told by Joan Goldstein that's been done in other states, a tax increment financing district to support or based on a transportation investment infrastructure. But I'll leave it there.
And we have something similar that the legislature put into effect a few years ago, I think under, I can't remember the act number, Joe probably does, Act 147 or 146, but it's a transportation improvement district. And so, yeah, that where we could have, or even doing something that's more general, because typically those just impact new development. You could do something more general, a special assessment district, and just have, like the employers in that area contribute towards that. And this is something we looked at when Michelle was with CCRPC going back maybe 2010. We had a good conversation, and there is willingness definitely on these property owners, these commercial property owners, to contribute to local match for this project for 12B in particular. I think they see it as providing much better direct access to what is a pretty significant area of employment zoning versus 13, which doesn't really have a lot of development opportunity around it. U-Mall is a little bit to the north here in Dorset. That can certainly be redeveloped at some point, but that's closer to 14 than 13. But there's not a lot of other property around 13 open for development. And that is something, that's good and bad. So we'll have some more conversation with South Burlington about the local land use implications. And then turning, so those are the three options. So we're trying to pick one of to move forward on 12 or 13. And then in 14, we have two options we're looking at. And they probably need one of those 12 or 13 to be in place first, because both of these options reduce capacity at exit 14. This diverging diamond, which is very similar to the design proposed at exit 16, same kind of movement. So we thought, if we're going to do something like that, we should make it look like exit 16 and work like exit 16, so people become used to getting on the other side of the road to make the left, right? And this is a much better design than the Cloverleaf for bicyclists and pedestrians. Traffic is slower, and there's signal protected movements if people want to get through here on a bike or walking. And I'll leave that one. And then the other idea is an enhanced Cloverleaf. So this is really taking the Cloverleaf that's there, which is the highest capacity type of interchange design you can have, and reducing the capacity a little bit by pulling the connections to Williston Road to Route 2 in a little bit, so it's not so free flow for traffic, and thereby making it safer for bicyclists and pedestrians. And this has been a very big local concern about how to make exit 14 work better for bicyclists and pedestrians. So much so that South Burlington has a plan that we worked on with them to put in a bike ped bridge just south of this interchange. Maybe one of these designs might obviate the need for that separate bike ped bridge, depending on timing. And the other big idea in this one that the diverging diamond doesn't have is a collector distributor lanes on 89, which would really physically separate the people that are trying to get on and off and merging from the through traffic, which is a big safety issue right now. We have, people slowing down while people are trying to go highway speeds. It's always the differential in speed where you get incidents and crashes. So those are the two concepts here at 14 that we're having community conversation about. Senator Chittenden mentioned the metrics. I'm not going to read all these, but under those 6 goals I mentioned earlier, we have very specific metrics, some related to bike peds, some environmental justice, some the environment, and traffic for sure, and land use, community impacts, regional plan consistency, the environment, the economy. And then a new one really, and I'll give Kevin quite a bit of credit for this, is really a whole goal on preserving the system and how to look at costs in a more holistic way. Instead of just looking at the capital cost, if new capital is if we're gonna replace a bridge, well, and that's new money, well, that replaces the need to replace it at some point in the future, just out of a preservation, maintenance standpoint, right? So we've kind of taken a deeper dive in cost, and we're looking for feedback now on these metrics and how we score them and weight them. We're working a lot with a lot of committees in South Burlington. I think we're gonna have a whole committee of their bike ped, natural resources, economic development, planning commission. I'm not sure how many committees on March 10th. And more committees beyond that, I'm sure, and more meetings to get public input, particularly in South Burlington, and also more broadly in Chittenden County about this. We're also reaching out to our neighboring RPCs, Northwest RPC and Central Vermont RPC, just to get input. They obviously are users of this interstate as well, and others, but they're at least the 2 that we're focused on having conversations with to get their input as well.
I think I'm talking too much,
Yes,
Senator.
Senator Chittenden.
Just one more comment, just because of my intimacy to this topic. I will say, I think the Senate Economic Development Committee might be interested in this. In my 6+ years on the South Burlington City Council, it's important to recognize how 12B is distinct from 13 and 14. You did speak to this, Charlie, but I've had many very intelligent people offer that 12B would open up and attract a lot of corporate investment. So I've heard the Googles and the Amazons that want to have a presence here in Vermont, they need easy access to the interstate. With those 2 tech parks there, that is one of the best ways that we could spur economic growth in the state of Vermont. So I don't want to dismiss or diminish the opportunity that 12B presents that has been proven out in some of the presentations that you've given so far. But you're right, there's 2 sides of that discussion. I would fall on one side of it, and I would just say it has a statewide economic impacts, 12B, whereas 13 and 14 is a bit more maintenance.
What's the cost? A couple $1 million to do this project, Senator Chittenden?
Thought I heard 27 million. It's gone up and down, Charlie. So I'd ask Charlie that question.
Okay.
And just to wrap this up, we're trying to get to these bundles. And I mentioned briefly, we're trying to do everything we can to avoid capacity investment. And then looking at one of the options, 12 or 13 options in the bundle 2, and then adding on whenever the bridge at 14 needs to be replaced. I think there's a great desire to replace it with a better design that works better for all users in exit 14. But if that reduces capacity, that has implications because it's pushing more traffic into Winooski and other places. So we're trying to be mindful of how the whole system works, not just specific locations. So this is kind of previewing where we're going in the fall. And this is just kind of letting you know we're having a lot of meetings over the coming, and this doesn't even include the meetings that have just gotten scheduled in the last couple of days. And there's an advisory committee that's very well rounded, including folks from CLF and VNRC, Local Motion, GMT, the Economic Land Developers Chamber, GBIC, and there's a website here. If you'd like to, I can show you one more slide that has more cost detail if you're interested.
Go ahead.
All right, sorry, it's going to take me a second to spin down. I added, lucky for you, what you're seeing is the rest of the full presentation that Senator Chittenden got. So this is the cost estimate slide. And I'll start off with what Kevin's team really helped with was they're looking just in this part of the 89 segment. So this is just from kind of 12B through 14. They're looking at over $94 million of maintenance costs, whenever they're needed at some point to replace those pieces is $94 million. So that was kind of an interesting starting point. We're going to probably over the years spend that kind of money here just maintaining the system. And then when we looked at the construction cost, you can see 12B is 29 million. That hybrid with that center loop ramp was 15 million. That's that single point diamond interchange at 13 was 61. And then up at 14, it's 44 million and 37 million, so around 40 million for each of those options. But what we did was look at how many assets would this new construction replace. So it kind of takes it out of the maintenance side of the program and puts it into the new capital. And then when we total those together, the numbers start to get a little bit closer. So we'd end up with 117 at 12B, 105 at 13, 109 with or somewhere around 105 to 110 to 13, and around 120 at exit 14. So the incremental cost of adding some new infrastructure may not be as great as just looking at the construction cost of it. And Kevin, do you have a better way to say that than what I just said?
Senator Ingalls just said you could pave the whole county up all of his district on that money right there. Every road, back road, right, Senator?
Yeah, and we did see a street light once.
No, I think you covered it pretty well, Charlie. I mean, I think it's important, and I mentioned it at the beginning, and thank you for emphasizing it, Charlie. That 94 million, if we look at 30 years in bridge condition, culvert condition, large culvert condition, and the pavement, VTrans is going to be investing in this corridor pretty heavily in the next 30 years, even if we do nothing along this corridor. So, I think it's an important part of this study. Again, as I mentioned earlier, not necessarily something that we've considered I know in previous studies I've been involved in along this corridor.
It certainly has served a purpose for many. It's amazing that when it was built in the 60s that it's still, functioning quite well. I mean, considering, 40, 60 years ago or whatever, that the traffic, the increase in traffic, it was pretty well planned years ago. And certainly a lot of growth has happened since then, but.
Absolutely. And, when you think about the interstate system, when you think about the traffic volumes in the 60s and 70s, what they are today is one thing. But then you look at, and I know, it seems like every year we talk about truck weights, and, those increased loads, those were not anticipated in the 60s and 70s either.
That's
so
a long time ago. When you talk 60 years ago.
The interstate has served us well, but it's starting to get tired.
Yeah, it is. There's no doubt about that. I'm surprised it's still functioning quite well. I mean, there are problems naturally, but it serves a purpose quite well for the amount of growth that's happened in Chittenden County. Back when it was built, there was very little growth in South Burlington side, and now that's a major economic center there for industry. Yes, questions?
I was just going to mention something on Senator Chittenden's point about the economic development on the new exit 83 or whatever the number is going to be. That would probably be a good place for a service center for an electric vehicle manufacturer.
So if I may.
Yes.
Well, Senator Perchlik, you raise a great point. And one thing that in my Green Mountain Transit role, we have two types of riders of public transportation. You've got dependent riders and choice riders. And if you really want to get choice riders, people that have access economically or otherwise to single occupancy vehicles, if you want to get them out of their cars, you need to make it convenient. And what I also say with 12B, and this is the landowners there are very willing, I think, to work. I know the landowners, and they'd be willing to work with us, and they would want to have those conveniences, a park and ride, a convenient park and ride, maybe covered with solar panels and maybe a service center as well. That I think that could definitely should be mandated as part of any 12B conversation to make sure that we can get people out of their vehicles so that they can start to use public transit. So you raise a great point, Senator Perchlik, and that's something 12B has that the others don't. So I think that should be in the criteria as well. I mean, exit 83.
I wonder what it's going to take to make people ride the bus more. We keep saying they're going to ride the bus, but what does it really take? I don't see a lot of ridership increases over the years, and I don't know what it takes. I mean, I see buses day after day after day with nobody on them, and it's just, I don't know what we can do. I don't know. Yes, Charlie. Yeah.
I'll say the way we talk about it is it's really all about the land use. If you're not living in a location, where you can easily walk to the bus, it's not that easy to,
Right.
Once you're in your car,
Yeah.
it kind of takes another level of effort to like stop, get off, wait for the bus. And it's probably going to take longer because it's going to stop. So, it's a challenge. It's on our land use pattern, and we're a rural state. Even most of Chittenden County is rural. And, so, most people drive where, I mentioned the mode share, we're at 88% driving, and even with all these investments in walking, biking, and transit, we're just looking, we're forecasting, we're, kind of trying to estimate, but we only go from 88 to 84% driving, which is significant, but it doesn't solve all the problems.
Okay, do we have Amy Bell, is she on the agenda for today? No? I thought she,
Yes,
oh,
she's here.
okay. Any other questions at this point from Charlie? And we'll move on to Amy if that's all right. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. Appreciate it.
We
Amy,
really-
you got something to add to this conversation?
Senator Mills, I was just here to listen in to Charlie's and Kevin's
Okay.
presentation, so I don't have anything to add. I'm just the
All right.
staff person who's the agency's liaison to CCRPC, so they asked me to.
Okay, all right. Well, I just didn't know what we're going to do here.
Thanks.
Okay, anybody, Charlie, anything else you want to add to this conversation at this time, or Senator Chittenden, or anybody else?
I would love to come back when we're wrapping this up, probably a year from now, and
Okay.
make sure you're all aware of what came out of this process. And we are having more public meetings, including with underrepresented communities, and really also trying to figure out how to really look at racial equity in the context of this study, which is a little challenge. We don't have that figured out. If anybody has ideas on that, we're all ears. So thank you.
Well, Senator Chittenden would like a 4-lane highway in front of his house. I don't know if that can be arranged. He says it's kind of, that 2-lane doesn't work well, so.
I'm just trying to get a bike path, but I want to just say how great Charlie Baker is. He's just a phenomenal resource to all of Chittenden County. And I just want to thank you for all of your due diligence and all of your work on this important topic. It's been phenomenal. So great work.
It's a team. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, unless there's any other further questions, comments, anything else? All right, thank you very much for the overview this morning. Appreciate it. And we'll look forward to seeing you again sometime in the future. Okay? Thank you, Charlie. Okay, committee. Unless the